August 25, 1998. A brown cardboard package arrives at record stores across America. Inside is a debut solo album from a 23-year-old woman who had just given birth, walked away from one of hip-hop's biggest groups, and spent the last year pouring her heartbreak into music recorded in her attic. The album's liner notes credit her as producer, writer, and arranger of nearly every track. The title is deliberately provocative: The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Within 7 days, it breaks the SoundScan record for best-selling debut week by a female artist, moving 422,600 copies. By February 1999, Lauryn Hill stands on the Grammy stage holding 5 trophies, including Album of the Year, the first hip-hop artist to win the music industry's most prestigious award. But behind the triumph lies a story the Grammys didn't tell. A story of creative battles, hidden collaborations, and a lawsuit that would reveal the true cost of genius. This is the story of how one album changed music forever, and then nearly destroyed everyone who made it. Welcome to the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. This is Lauryn Hill's. To understand The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, you have to understand what Lauryn Hill was running from. Summer 1996. The FUGEES are on top of the world. Their album The Score has gone multi-platinum, spawning the massive hit Killing Me Softly. The trio, Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, and Pras Michel, have transcended hip-hop, becoming a cultural phenomenon that bridges rap, R&B, and pop. But on that tour bus, something is breaking. Jason Jackson, Hill's manager at the time, remembers the phone call. "Lauryn called me like, I can't believe these motherfuckers. I've been talking about making my solo record for the longest, and they're doing everybody's solo record but mine. I'm leaving the group. I've had it." The fracture was personal. Hill and Wyclef Jean had been romantically involved, a relationship that ended badly. While the music world saw 3 friends making revolutionary hip-hop, behind the scenes there was tension, jealousy, and unfinished business. Hill wanted out. She wanted to prove she could do it alone. Jackson recalls her determination. She was like, "I don't want to fuck with them, I just want to get a whole new crew." But there was a problem. Sony Records didn't want Lauryn Hill's solo album. They wanted another FUGEES record. The label saw the trio as a proven commodity, Hill as a solo artist. That was a risk. A pregnant solo artist walking away from a successful group to make deeply personal music? That was career suicide. Hill did it anyway. Fall 1997. In a living room in South Orange, New Jersey, Lauryn Hill sits wearing a brown robe, visibly pregnant. Spread around her are young musicians from Newark who have no idea they're about to make history. Vada Nobles, a producer and programmer, remembers arriving. "My friend Kilo called and said, 'Yo, bring some music. Lauryn Hill wants us to come to her house.'" In her living room, Lauryn had on a brown robe. She was pregnant. She was saying she's moving on from the FUGEES and considering doing a solo record. She was looking to put together her own creative support team. Hill assembled what she called Newark, a deliberate play on Newark and Noah's Ark. The core group consisted of Vada Nobles on programming and beats, Rashim Kilo Pugh writing hooks and lyrics, Tejumold Newton on piano, and Johari Newton on guitar. They were young, hungry, and unknown. This wasn't an accident. Hill needed collaborators she could control. Artists who wouldn't overshadow her, musicians who would be grateful for the opportunity. Commissioner Gordon Williams, the engineer who would become Hill's right hand throughout the recording, explains the dynamic. "She wanted to prove she could do it without the big names. The divinity of the scenario was always overwhelming to me because I could feel it all the time." But there was another reason Hill chose unknowns. Her ex, Wyclef Jean, was actively blocking established producers from working with her. Rohan Marley, Bob Marley's son and the father of Hill's child, witnessed it firsthand. Nobody else wanted to work with her because there was little feud going on, and Wyclef was telling people, "You work with Lauryn, you don't work with me." Hill was being isolated, so she built her own family. The recording began in New Jersey, in makeshift studios and Hill's own attic. She had a specific vision: raw, unpolished, emotional. She told engineers she wanted music that sounded muddy, like an old record scratching. She rejected the smooth digital perfection that defined late 90s production. Commissioner Gordon remembers Hill's philosophy. "I don't like to use compressors and take away my textures, because I was raised on music that was recorded before technology advanced to the place where it could be smooth. I want to hear that thickness of sound. You can't get that from a computer." The early sessions were collaborative, almost therapeutic. The Newark musicians would lay down tracks, and Hill would transform them with her lyrics and vocals. Nobles describes creating X Factor, There was a female group called X Factor signed to Arista, and we did a song called X Factor for them. And then we started working on a song called Loved Real Hard Once. The title got switched to When It Hurts So Bad. Those were the first 2 records that we worked on. The songs were intensely personal. I Used to Love Him chronicled her relationship with Wyclef. Nobles recalls the moment it came together. We were having a conversation about her relationship in the little studio in her attic in South Orange, and that's how I Used to Love Him came about. It was about Clef. But as the sessions progressed, Sony Records grew increasingly nervous. Commissioner Gordon explains, Sony never wanted her to make a solo record. They wanted her to make another FUGEES record. Hill and her mother took early versions of the album to Sony headquarters in New York. The label's response, as Rohan Marley remembers it, was devastating. Lauryn and her mom took her album to Sony Records and they said, "This is coffee table music. What is this shit? Coffee table music." She took her shit and walked out of there. The label saw the album as uncommercial, too raw, too personal, too female. They wanted radio-friendly hits. Hill was making art. While fighting the label and recording the album, Hill was dealing with something else entirely. Impending motherhood. Her relationship with Rohan Marley was still relatively new. The pregnancy was unplanned, and the pressure to abort came from everywhere. Managers, industry executives, even people who claimed to care about her career. Jason Jackson witnessed the scrutiny. She called me and sang a verse of Zion, and I was literally in tears. I went through that with her as a friend. Wendy Williams blowing her spot about her pregnancy on the radio. No one knew. It was definitely a Where's Waldo moment cause no one knew who Lauryn was dating. Rohan Marley confirms the pressure. She ended up having a child from myself and once telling her she need to abort the child. The industry math was simple. Pregnant women don't sell records. New mothers don't tour. Having a baby at the peak of your career is professional suicide, especially in hip-hop, where female artists were already fighting for legitimacy. Hill's response became the emotional centerpiece of the album, To Zion. Producer Che Guevara, later known as Che Vicious, created the track in the most unlikely circumstances. I lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn, and there was this little studio apartment on the top floor that didn't have air conditioning. I could only go in there for 20 minutes at a time to make tracks because it was too hot. And one of those 20 minutes is when I made Zion. I came in with the track and Lauryn teared up and said, "I have this idea to do a song about my baby and I didn't know what the music should sound like until I heard that track." Commissioner Gordon was there when Hill recorded the vocals. I remember the first time she sang To Zion to me, I almost started crying on the spot. She came over right next to me at the board and started singing Zion in my ear. These circumstances she's singing about I know firsthand. I'm at the label hearing everybody say, "How's this girl gonna get pregnant now?" The song was a declaration. She was choosing motherhood over career advice, choosing love over industry expectations, choosing herself. Guitar legend Carlos Santana heard the song and wanted to be part of it. The two artists made a swap. Santana played guitar on To Zion, and Hill contributed vocals to his Supernatural album. The result was one of the most emotional tracks in hip-hop history. Vada Nobles recognized its significance immediately. Out of all the records, Zion was her baby because it was about her child. Can't nobody interfere with that right there. That drum roll inspired Kanye's Jesus Walks. I know it did. By early 1998, Hill was feeling suffocated in New Jersey. The pressure from Sony was mounting. The studios were cramped. Too many people had opinions about her music. Rohan Marley offered a solution. One time at Chung King Studios, she was like, "I can't do this. There's too many people popping in." I said, "Let's go to Jamaica. You don't worry about anything." She needed to get away. She needed to get to the rock. Bob Marley's Tuff Gong Studios in Kingston, Jamaica became the unlikely birthplace of some of hip-hop's most iconic tracks. The journey there was an adventure. Vada Nobles remembers. We stayed way up in the hills and Rohan would take us to the studio. He would fly in that BMW around curves. He was messing with us. I remember being scared for my life. But Jamaica unlocked something in Hill's creativity. The studio itself was sacred ground. This is where Bob Marley had recorded Exodus and Rastaman Vibration. The lead engineer, Errol Brown, had worked directly with the reggae legend. The Marley family embraced the project. Stephen, Damien, Julian, and Ziggy Marley dropped by sessions. The energy was electric. Nobles describes the creation of Lost Ones. Forgive Them Father and Lost Ones were made at the Bob Marley Museum on 56 Hope Road. That's why on Lost Ones she says, "I was hopeless, now I'm on Hope Road." One particular session captured the spontaneous magic of the Jamaica recordings. Commissioner Gordon tells the story. Vada set up his drum machine and got the beat rocking. Lauryn was in the studio room redoing vocals. Stephen and Damian Marley would play football at the museum and hang out. I had a MPC 3000 and an SP 1200 connected together, and I said, "Wait a minute, this is hot, let me record that." Hill walked into the control room as the beat was playing. Bob Marley's grandchildren were running around the studio. Without preparation or written lyrics, Hill began freestyling. Gordon continues. Right as Lauryn walks in, she starts freestyling. All these little kids jumping around. As she kept doing that rhyme pattern, situation, complication, T-on, T-on, she would point to the kids and they all chimed in, T-on, T-on. She put down the verses on a handheld mic, 'cause she always had a different vibe when she would hold a mic. Rohan Marley witnessed the moment. The musicians, my brothers, the whole studio was filled with people. This place was moving. And she's just walking around and dropped a verse on that. She gave everybody chills. Those lyrics, they cut through you. That freestyle became Final Hour, one of the album's most technically impressive tracks. As word spread about Hill's project, bigger names wanted in. D'Angelo, fresh off his acclaimed debut Brown Sugar and working on his follow-up Voodoo, came to Hill's New Jersey home. Producer Che Vicious describes the genesis of their collaboration. I was messing around with these finger snap sounds for the D'Angelo song, and she started coming with the song out of her head. We built the record around this weird snap pattern. The result was Nothing Even Matters, a duet so intimate that churches later changed the lyrics to make it about God. D'Angelo recalls, collaborating with Lauryn was very cool. She was warm and sweet. When Lauryn and I went in the studio together, I laid down my vocals in the course of an hour. Then there was the John Legend story. Before he was John Legend, a University of Pennsylvania junior named John Stevens got invited to Hill's New Jersey house by a friend. Vada Nobles remembers, a friend of mine had a little studio in East Orange where Everything is Everything came about. Then John Legend came by and played. He was trying to get his career off the ground. Legend himself recalls, I was in the spring of my junior year at University of Pennsylvania. A friend invited me to give her a ride to Lauryn's house in Jersey. Lauryn was working Everything is Everything. I sang and played a couple songs for her. She asked me to play piano on the track. That piano part helped create one of the album's most uplifting moments. Legend adds, I became known around campus as the dude who played on Everything is Everything. It was my little claim to fame at Penn for my whole senior year. For Doo-Wop, That Thing, Hill created what would become the album's massive commercial breakthrough. The title came from random inspiration. Nobles explains, there was a box set that said Doo-Wop sitting on the floor. The title for her single Doo-Wop, That Thing, came off that box. The song's production was deliberately retro. Backup singer Lanisha Randolph, then just 18 years old, describes the session. Lauryn came in eating spaghetti pomodoro and garlic bread and explained where she's trying to go with this album. For Doo-Wop, she said, I want to play with 50s and 60s harmonies, like barbershop guys on the corner, and then we all just jumped in harmonizing a cappella. Hoo 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 hoo. The technical complexity of Doo-Wop was staggering. Commissioner Gordon reveals, when I mixed Doo-Wop at Sony Studios, it was 128 tracks, two 48-track machines plus two 24 2-inch machines all running at the same time. By June 1998, Hill was in the final push. She was 8 months pregnant. Sony was demanding the album be finished. The pressure was overwhelming. One legendary session captures Hill's work ethic and spontaneous genius. Gordon tells the story of recording Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. She called me and said she was behind and had to get it done. She didn't know how the arrangement of the song went, so we went and got a copy from Coconuts or Sam Goody. I had a little one-room 16-track studio in my apartment in Jersey. Lauryn was 8 months pregnant, laying on her back on the floor, half asleep, holding a handheld mic. She did all of those vocals off the top of her head pretty much in one take, with the beatbox and all of that. 8 months pregnant, lying on a studio floor, recording a complex vocal arrangement in one take. This was the level of dedication Hill brought to every song. Backup singer Candace Anderson witnessed Hill's perfectionism on other tracks. She's very particular about how she wants it to sound. We'll keep going until it gets to exactly what she hears in her head, and she won't stop until she gets exactly what she wants. The album's narrative structure came together late in the process. Hill wanted classroom interludes throughout the record, discussions about love as education. She recruited Ras Baraka, a Newark 8th grade teacher, poet, and future mayor. Baraka remembers the unusual recording session. I was running for councilman in Newark and was also an 8th grade teacher. I was just about to take 2 of my students home and Lauryn called and asked if I could come up to her house in South Orange. There were chairs set up in the living room and a bunch of kids were there. She told me she wanted to discuss the concept of love. There was a blackboard and I wrote the letters love and we just went into the whole discussion. Those improvised conversations with children became the emotional through line of the album, turning it into a literal miseducation. Lauryn Hill absent from class, while learning about love the hard way through lived experience. The album title itself came from that concept. Jason Jackson explains, "For the album title, she wanted something like The Education of Sonny Carson, and we were like, why don't you make it more self-deprecating, like The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill?" People heard it as her opus and what she was, but in hindsight, I think it was more about what she aspired to be. August 25, 1998. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill hit stores. The first week sales numbers stunned the industry. 422,600 copies sold. It was a SoundScan record for best-selling debut week by a female artist. Doo-Wop, That Thing, became the first debut single by a female artist to enter the Billboard Hot 100 at number 1. Critics who had been skeptical fell in line. Rolling Stone gave it 4 stars. The source called it revolutionary. Even mainstream publications that typically ignored hip-hop couldn't ignore this. Mary J. Blige, one of R&B's biggest stars, declared it one of the most incredible albums ever made. By the end of 1998, the album had sold over 8 million copies in the United States alone. Worldwide sales would eventually exceed 18 million. In January 1999, the Grammy nominations were announced. Lauryn Hill received 10 nominations, tying the record for most nominations for a female artist in a single year. February 24, 1999. The 41st Annual Grammy Awards. Lauryn Hill walked into the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles as a 23-year-old new mother who had gambled her career on a deeply personal album that industry executives called coffee table music. She left with 5 Grammy Awards: Album of the Year, Best New Artist, Best R&B Album, Best R&B Song, and Best Female R&B Vocal Performance. Album of the Year, music's most prestigious award, had never been won by a hip-hop artist. Hill broke that barrier. During her acceptance speech, she read from Psalm 40. "I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined unto me and heard my cry." The victory was complete. Hill had proven everyone wrong. The label executives who said the album was uncommercial, the industry advisors who told her to abort her baby, the former bandmates who tried to sabotage her solo career. Jason Jackson reflects on the strategy. "We marketed and presented her as a classy, genuine person, and that resonated, and that's why we're still talking about it till this day." The album's impact extended far beyond sales and awards. As the Library of Congress would later note when adding it to the National Recording Registry, Hill had created a seismic social and psychic shift in hip-hop. She proved that hip-hop could be vulnerable, melodic, and emotionally complex without losing its authenticity. She showed that female artists could rap and sing at the highest level. She demonstrated that personal, confessional songwriting could be commercially successful in a genre often dominated by braggadocio and machismo. Producer James Poyser explains the album's universality. "The lyrics of that record really struck a chord with everybody. It really touched a lot of souls. The best songs are testimonies of life that everybody can relate to. Everybody can't relate to bowling and drinking Cristal and running around with a million chicks and driving a Bentley. Everybody can relate to heartache and love. But at the moment of Hill's greatest triumph, a darkness was gathering." November 1998. Just 3 months after the album's release, 4 musicians filed a 50-page lawsuit in U.S. District Court in Newark, New Jersey. The plaintiffs, Vada Nobles, Rashim Kilopu, Tejumold Newton, and Johari Newton, the musicians who had formed the core of Newark. The team Hill had personally assembled and nurtured. Their claim, Hill had stolen credit for songs they wrote and produced. The lawsuit alleged that the Newark musicians had been promised proper credit and compensation for their work. Instead, the album's liner notes credited Hill as the sole producer and primary writer of nearly every track. Vada Nobles explains his perspective. "Everything changed. It went from we to I. Everything started out genuine, but somewhere down the line, something switched. Once it became clear that I wouldn't be credited or compensated according to what's fair, I had to voice how I felt. I had a wife and family. She barely credited me. She gave Che my credits. As God as my witness, that was in spite." The lawsuit claimed that Hill had systematically written the Newark team out of the creative process. Songs they had worked on for months were credited solely to Hill. Production techniques they developed together bore only her name. Peter C. Harvey, the attorney for the Newark group, was blunt. Hill was exaggerating her artistic credentials. He claimed the hip-hop diva put her name on Newark's work to establish herself as a complete artist, producer, writer, arranger, rather than just a singer and rapper. Hill's camp dismissed the lawsuit as an attempt by overreaching studio musicians to cash in on her success. They argued that Hill had transformed basic beats and hooks into complete songs through her vision, lyrics, and arrangements. Jason Jackson defends Hill's position. Our mistake was Lauryn never wanted to do paperwork or formalize the relationship with them. She was like, I don't want them to feel like they work for me, and that came back to bite us. She looked at Vada as a drum programmer, like, I want you to make a beat, take that out, do this. The distinction was crucial. Did the Newark musicians create the foundation of these songs? Or did they simply provide technical support for Hill's vision? Jackson continues. Kilo claimed to be an MC, but early on it became clear that he wasn't no MC. Ain't nobody write no Lauryn Hill song, them shits was way too personal. Producer Che Vicious, who also felt his contributions were minimized, offers a more nuanced view. She gave me co-production on To Zion, but I did the track on my own. There was label pressure to do the Prince thing, written and produced by. I still love you like a sister, but you didn't do it on your own. The lawsuit dragged on for over 2 years. Depositions were taken. Documents were subpoenaed. The ugly details of studio sessions were dissected by lawyers. Rohan Marley defends Hill passionately. A team of them ganged up against her. Of course she sits there like, Ro, give me a word that rhymes with rat. I say cat just to trigger something. Nobody writes anything for her. Because she's a woman of the Almighty, she doesn't want to fight. The case never went to trial. In February 2001, Hill settled with the Newark musicians for an undisclosed sum, reportedly $5 million. The settlement came with no admission of wrongdoing, no public apology, no corrected album credits. Vada Nobles describes the aftermath. Eventually, Lauryn decided she didn't want to go on with it no more. The lawyers were mad that she wanted to quit. Kilo and I went to her house and made peace right after the depositions. I haven't seen or heard from her since. The lawsuit coincided with a dramatic shift in Hill's public persona. The woman who had stood on the Grammy stage triumphant began withdrawing from the music industry. She canceled appearances. She grew increasingly unpredictable at concerts. She began showing up hours late to performances, sometimes not showing up at all. Jason Jackson witnessed the transformation. It started to get strange. Bible study went from 1 day a week to 3 days a week to 5 days a week to, I want you to come. I went to a couple of them, but I was like, I completely understand if it's your calling, but it's not mine and I can't force it. As that picked up, we drifted further and further apart. Hill became intensely spiritual, sometimes rigidly so. She began insisting people call her Ms. Hill rather than Lauryn. She spoke cryptically about industry conspiracies and feeling controlled. Commissioner Gordon reflects on the pressure. Sometimes when you have a really big blessing, you have a really big weight that comes along with that, and some people can get weak along the way. The highs were super high, and the lows were super low. The second album everyone expected never materialized. Instead, Hill released MTV Unplugged 2.0 in 2002, a raw, barely produced live recording that divided fans and critics. The polished songwriter and producer of Miseducation was replaced by someone raw, almost confrontational in her refusal to meet commercial expectations. Praz Michel, her former FUGEES bandmate, offers a philosophical perspective. It's not that Lauryn is crazy. If it's not the orthodox way, then people tend to say you're crazy. People said Einstein was crazy. Lauryn had whatever she was dealing with personally, and sometimes people don't know how to give you a break because she had such an impact. Vada Noble suggests Hill was rebelling against being boxed in. The type of pressure, selling 18 million records worldwide, winning all these Grammys and people love you, and then you want to be outside the box, change up your hairstyle, express yourself, and people say, no, that's not you. She ain't the type of woman that you gonna box in. Hill herself explained her retreat in a 1999 interview. I just can't do anything if I'm not inspired. I always sort of wait for the inspiration to come. And if the spirit doesn't drive me to do it, then I won't do it. 'Cause I definitely know that what I'm doing is sort of bigger than me. She chose motherhood over career. She had 5 more children with Rohan Marley, and 1 with another partner. She lived in South Orange, New Jersey, away from the spotlight, raising her children while the music industry waited for a follow-up album that would never come. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill never received a proper follow-up, but its influence spread like gospel. The album cleared a path for every artist who came after. It proved that hip-hop could win Album of the Year at the Grammys. It showed that deeply personal, emotionally vulnerable music could sell millions. It demonstrated that female artists could dominate rap and R&B simultaneously. Listen to early Kanye West, The College Dropout, and Late Registration, and you hear Hill's influence. The introspective lyrics, the soul samples, the willingness to be vulnerable about personal struggles. Kanye has cited Hill as a major influence. Listen to Alicia Keys, listen to Jasmine Sullivan, listen to India Arie, listen to early Beyoncé, listen to Adele's confessional songwriting, listen to Kendrick Lamar's introspective approach to hip-hop. All of them walk through doors Hill opened. Nas wrote about the album's significance. It represents the time period, a serious moment in black music, when young artists were taking charge and breaking through doors. It cleared the way for rap music to be what it is today. John Legend, now a massive star himself, reflects on Hill's genius. Lauryn had that blend of toughness and soulfulness, melody and swagger. She did it better than anybody still has done it. People are still trying to capture that moment. In 2018, the Library of Congress added The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill to the National Recording Registry, recognizing it as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The lawsuit that tarnished the album's creation has become part of its legend, a cautionary tale about credit, collaboration, and the price of genius. Commissioner Gordon offers a measured perspective. Lauryn was everybody's favorite singer, and you can hear it in so many singers now. She gave the world something. And if that's all there is, maybe it was enough. Vada Nobles, despite the lawsuit and years of estrangement, still believes in Hill's talent. Lauryn ain't dead. Lauryn is very much alive. That woman's alive. The story of The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is the story of America's most complicated relationship with genius. We celebrate artists who bare their souls, then punish them when that vulnerability becomes too raw, too real, too uncomfortable. We demand authenticity, then litigate over who owns it. We create legends, then feel betrayed when those legends choose privacy over performance. Hill made one perfect album. She won 5 Grammys. She changed music forever. And then she walked away. Maybe that's the most revolutionary thing she did. In an industry that demands artists produce until they're empty, Hill simply stopped. She chose her children over albums. She chose peace over applause. She chose silence over selling her soul. The lawsuit raised legitimate questions about credit and collaboration, but it also revealed something darker. Our collective inability to accept that genius is messy, that creation is collaborative, that the line between inspiration and authorship is rarely clean. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill won 5 Grammys. It also ended in a $5 million lawsuit. Both things are true. Both things matter. And 26 years later, the album still sounds like nothing else. Still resonates with millions. Still opens doors for new artists. That 8-month pregnant woman lying on a studio floor at 3 a.m. recording vocals in one take. She created something timeless. And whether she did it alone or with help, whether she deserved all the credit or should have shared more, none of that changes the fact that The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is one of the greatest albums ever made. This has been the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. And some stories like Lauryn Hill's never really end.